Hey, everybody, this is the part 2 series for how to make money with hard money with Joe Faw. Follow along. We can kind of jump to some building teams and some negotiation tactics next, but I think just to kind of wrap our point up here, how can you I know might be some people listening, like, where do I start? I think we do this a lot with our team, but identifying mentors, we've talked about that briefly, but getting a mentor is finding somebody who's doing what you want to do to a high level and go ask them to work for free for them. Help them. We have a couple stories about that. We have Brighton over here, who's an intern. He's still in high school. He's here with us on a Saturday shooting podcasts. He's in the office all week long on summer break. Cade on our team also. He told him that you can come work for us, but you might not make money for a year. He came, got a job at night time, was bartending, figuring out, just being a fly on the wall, just learning, being there. And before you know it, you're in the office. We're like, hey, this guy's, serious about learning. And hey, we got a lead here. Why don't you take it and run with it? And all of a sudden you got opportunity, you get reps. And it might start with, hey, can you help me with some menial task? But it will grow as you build confidence and get around the right people. Yeah, so
100%. We all got to pay our dues. You are who you hang out with. So, I would just say again, especially if it's a young person, if all of your friends just care about drinking and girls and this, that, yeah, it's going to be very difficult for you to be the one guy that cares about all the other things, if that's what you actually care about. And again, I'm not judging. I'm not trying to say that you need to be the way I think, right?
But you're the sum of your 5 closest friends. That's what they say, right?
100%, right? And I think, again, the mentor, okay, well, where do I find a mentor? What does that mean? Google is so easy, right? So look up, executive coaching. What are the top 5 podcasts I should be listening to? What are the top 3 books I should be reading right now, right? Those are the things that help shape your mind. And then you try to find really hard how to implement them into your daily life. But again, the smorgasbord, going back to the Greek restaurant, what I have found that's challenging is at times there's too much information. So you get kind of confused. Like for a month you start doing this, and the next month you start doing that. Then the next thing you know, you just did like 5 things and you weren't good at any of them. It goes back to the expertise. One thing I did this year is just from a supplement and workout regimen. Yeah. I'm like, I'm doing these 3 things for 1 year, and I don't care what any article anybody sends me. I'm not even going to consider doing something else. So that for me was my own way of becoming good at 3 things. And then I'll set a date and I'll open up and I'll be like, all right, well, maybe I can do something else because now this is on autopilot. Yeah. That's an analogy for business. We have our 4 profiles I just told you about. Yep. We literally meet twice a year to think through, should we get a different profile? What's the macro environment telling us? But we do that strategically. We do that in a meeting. So we're not waking up one day like, oh, I wake up on Monday and I read an article on Sunday and now the whole company is going to start doing this. People will quit. The number one reason that team members have come to us when we're interviewing them and talking through them, their number one complaint is that there's no true strategy where they're coming from. And usually ownership or leadership, depending on what side of the bed they wake up, will change that trajectory. Yeah. So that inconsistent strategy, right, is very difficult to get alignment in team members. And so to me, it's just like, why would you do that? Yeah. And so I think that's a personality thing with leaders, but I think it's a bad thing to do.
I like older principles too. Like personally, I've been like really into self-improvement. It could be general, right? And I really am into these older ideas. We talked about Stoic a little bit, but I'm really into the Stoic ideas because these are principles that have been around since, year 180, in Rome in ancient times. And these ideas have been passed through centuries, now, and they still, as you're reading Meditations or some Marcus Aurelius books, you're like, holy, this is really applicable in today's life also. Yeah. So I think some of these older ideas, and Jim Rohn is another huge one that I listen to. Yeah, he's got these speeches from the 70s that are so applicable to 2023. It's mind blowing, and it's like you work harder on yourself than you do at your job, and then you can be successful. You can, and so I've really taken that personally, and I brainwash myself. I'll use that word. I know it could be negative. I'll brainwash myself with positivity. Yeah. I wake up and I listen to the Daily Stoic every single day. It's positive, like positive reinforcement, visualization. We can talk about that for a second because I really believe in that. I think if you can visualize where you want to go and actually spend time thinking about it and picturing it to details and picturing how your day is going to be early in the morning. Like I'm you have a meeting that day. This meeting is going to, visualize how the meeting is going to go, where you're going to be sitting in the room, and what type of conversation that you want to have. And then when you're there, these ideas will come naturally. My dad used to tell me before soccer games, I'd try to visualize 100 ways of me scoring a goal. In the soccer field, there's a million ways you can score. So I try to visualize 100 ways that I could score a goal. So when I'm getting in the game, it's just like, it's there for you. And, I picture myself scoring a header, then my right foot cutting from the left in, and so you'd have all these ideas in your head. And right now, I want to think about, what's the house that I want? What's the car I want to drive? What's the business look like? What does my wife and family look like? I got a baby on the way right now. It's like, what does my daughter's life look like when she's 10? I want to try to visualize that and see it.
So one thing that I'll piggyback off that and say is that, Andrew Huberman has a couple podcasts that kind of talk about revisualization.
Yeah.
And I think in general, that's, I like the neuroscience behind it. So what he did was he kind of did studies on, he took baseball as an example, what's more important, visualizing how I'm going to hit, right? Or is it more important to go get the reps?
Right.
What they found was that it's actually better to get the reps, but at the same time, visualizing does have a ton of value.
Yeah.
So when obviously you can get reps in whatever that means to everybody, but then you also have the opportunity when you're downtime to be able to visualize. So I'm in agreement with you. I'm trying to think through ways to visualize better, to do it intentionally. Because remember, I think we're talking right now, and at some level we're coming off like, do this, right? It's like, but we're also human. And so we fail, right? Like we have moments that we didn't do. We're not practicing what we preach.
Oh yeah.
And that's okay, right? Just admit it right away and then do something about it. So the neuroscience behind visualization, why it matters, how do you do it? That's where I think some entrepreneurs, and I would implore that we all try to get better, and then self-improvement, we do that because then we get the good outcomes from it. So I agree. I'm kind of on the forefront of really studying that, especially how it relates to the brain.
Yeah.
You use the word, manipulate. I think that can be a negative word as well. But I will say, because I don't have a better word, is that all I'm trying to do right now is manipulate my brain all the time.
Self-manipulation.
I'm a big, I'm reading a book right now called Incognito. And it talks a lot about the subconscious. And so part of the reason I'm trying to manipulate my brain is because I'm actually, this book is helping me realize I'm starting to believe that everything is just not conscious. And I'll give an example. When a pitcher throws a fastball 100 miles an hour, it literally takes 0.4 seconds to hit the plate. So from his arm to the guy's glove is 0.4 seconds. Your conscious brain, the quickest it can swing a bat is 0.5. So what that means is that anybody that throws a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, if the batter is conscious, he will never hit the ball 100% of the time. So we all know that they do hit the ball. So why does that happen? It's because they're subconscious. They're actually not thinking.
Yeah.
So that actually turns into that muscle twitch, and you're seeing it in your eyes, but you can't consciously run through your brain quick enough to be able to hit the ball. So you subconsciously do it.
Yeah.
If you've played high level sports, you and I both have examples of things just happened on the soccer field and you didn't really know why. It just happened really quick. Maybe it was a volley, maybe it was a tackle, maybe it was something, and it just happened split second, right?
Sure.
And so I think if we can dive into the subconscious a little bit, realize that it exists, manipulate our conscious brain to allow our subconscious, right? You go back to you're talking Stoic, and I think about the Einsteins and guys that kind of really changed the world in terms of how we viewed it. A lot of that was done on psychedelics. A lot of that was done on, right? A lot of that was done on, they were just subconscious and they were the crazy thinkers, right?
Yeah.
And so again, what can we do to manipulate our brains to be able to, tap into that subconscious to potentially be able to move the needles in different ways, different things. And
I love that.
Again, I'm not articulating in a way that I'm ready to say this is exactly what you do, but I am trying very
everybody's got to find their own.
Well, and that's what I'm studying, and that's what I'm looking at, and that's what's interesting to me, because I think there's something there.
Yeah.
I think it kind of says what you said with the Stoic and all that too.
I totally agree. And life is malevolence. My life is hard. Life is difficult. Bad things happen to you, so you use the word manipulate, and I know people can think that's negative, but life is negative. So you need to, Mike Tyson's the best example of this. His trainer was flooding. He used to say if you have one negative thought that comes in, you got to throw 13 positive thoughts back at it, to counteract it. You got to flood. You got to tell yourself how, he would say how grateful I am for my hands and how fast and strong and how I love myself and I love my body, and thank you God for giving me this mind and putting all these experiences behind me so I could, and just telling yourself 8 to 10 positive things for every one negative thing that would pop into your mind.
And that's a way that he manipulates the people actually say in this book, Incognito, talks about there's another voice in your head.
Right.
And Mike Tyson's a great example.
He really is. I
wasn't prepared to talk about that, but in my mind, it's like, I think he's actually talked about that voice in his head. Right. Yeah. And so again, often. I mean, I think however you want to label that voice, if it's a voice that you want to hear, okay, keep running with it.
Well, it's happening no matter what. So like you could, whether you like it or not, that voice is there. So you're going to make it positive or negative, because it's going to be more negative, because fight or flight, we're humans, we have anxiety, like that will be negative. Automatically, that's the default setting.
Dude, there's tons of clinical studies out there that kind of show, like when it goes back to like your body, right? That your body tells you, hey, I need to stop working out. Right. I'll give a free diving example. I was big into free diving, and we did some classes and tried to get good at it. And basically what happens is like your diaphragm starts kind of convulsing a little bit because you're underwater and like your body says it needs to breathe. You actually have like another minute left. That's crazy. I was doing something where I actually had a paramedic right next to me, and we were doing what's called I wasn't swimming. I was just in the shallow end. It was in the shallow water, and I was just standing there, and I got my heart rate really low. And I literally started convulsing at 2 minutes. So I was underwater for 2 minutes, just holding my breath. And it just got like feeling that way. Jesus. And I'm just like, in a weird way, I don't want people to think I'm super crazy, but like, I'm like, I got a paramedic right here. Worst case, I black out. He's going to grab me and I'll be good. Right. And I wanted to know how far I could push my body. I literally was about to like choke and breathe, but I'm like, I'm just going to keep going. I got all the way to 4 minutes. I had a little bit of hypoxia. But my point for that is that it proved to me in that moment that your body thinks you're like about to die and you need to get up at literally 2 minutes or 2 minutes and 20 seconds. And you could go another minute and a half. Maybe I could have even gone at some point, something would have happened. But
the David Goggins 40% rule.
It's your brain. So it's your brain telling you there's mechanisms that like, hey, to be safe, but we've got safety factors. Right. So when we're all trying to push the envelope a little bit, I'm not trying to say do anything that, is going to have major consequences to it, like being underwater and not being able to breathe. So do that. I'm not condoning that. But in general, I think it is pushing that envelope and realizing that your brain is weak, actually. Your body is actually weak. It's constantly giving you these weak signals. Yep. I want a donut. I want this. It's like, no, you don't. Go read Jocko Willick's book on discipline. Like there's so many ways that you can just educate yourself, and it's all fake. Right. So if you can manipulate yourself to do the right thing because you actually care about that more. Like I would say to you, like, I don't like working out. Do you like working out? Probably not. I love the way it makes me feel for like 24 hours. So guess what? That's more important to me than the 45 minutes that I'm working out. And I constantly keep doing it. So that's where like the David Goggins of the world, they're like the suffering, the pain, all that. He's a little extreme. Sure. But at the same time, I think those are examples of pushing your body, pushing your mind, and then it's good dopamine, good baseline comes from that. Cortisol goes down. So it's all management.
Yeah, I think even like, and it's hard to have those natural challenges in life. Like that's why you put yourself in that position, and it maybe sounds like a little much, but you look for moments to try to figure out. Caleb and I call them man in the mirror moments. It's like, how do you create those? Often everyday life doesn't always create them. I know some people have death and, disease and things that really do happen, but you can create man in the mirror moments on your own. Jesse Itzler calls them like misogis, like what's your one time per year, he puts the challenge so hard in front of him where he creates a man in the mirror moment and he has to find out, like, what am I really about? It's like whether he runs 100 miles or, something extreme, it can be where meet yourself where you're at. If you haven't ran a mile, maybe it's running 3 miles, but if you're a regular runner, it might be a 100-mile run, or it might be, we did a 4x4 by 48. It's like, what is this? Maybe once a year you're doing a triathlon. It doesn't even have to be, it doesn't have to necessarily be physical. I even know some guys that did a 24-hour walk with no headphones or phone. Yeah. And like, that was like a life-changing experience for them.
Our director of construction is literally paddling over the Gulf Stream right now. Right. He's got a group and they're doing relay and he's paddling over, and I'm like, applaud the crap out of him. Because I'm like, it's just such a good call. So again, I think
prepares you for the hard ones that life does throw at you. You can't control.
Yeah, look, it's fun. And again, like you're saying, there's death, there's bullying, there's divorces, there's all of these things. So there's all this negative crap that happens. It's happened to me. It's happened to you. Things happen. I think, one thing I would urge, and when I think about depression and I think about anxiety and I think about psychology and psychiatrists and all those different things, right? Those are all management to try to help deal with a stimuli or a trigger that happens and then feelings that are associated with it. So one of the things that my dad and I talk about a lot about is like the world gripping your brain, right? It grips your brain. And so, we are allowed to be emotional when something bad happens. It's just a function of how long do you want to be in that emotional state. And if it's worth it to you to be in the emotional state for a month, then okay. If it's 2 months, okay. If it's 2 minutes, okay.
Sure.
For me, I try really hard to consciously and subconsciously understand who I am, what I'm feeling. We all have the same emotional responses mostly to stimuli. Yep. When you see one person get really pissed off for a week, and another person get pissed off for a minute on the same stimuli, they both had the exact same emotions. That person just was able to manage it in a minute. This person took a week. And I'm not even saying that one's better than the other. Maybe you should have had that emotion for a week. I don't know.
Yeah.
My point is be conscious about it, realize that you're in it. And then what is your management tool to get in and out of that emotion? Because trying to say, I'm not going to have the emotion, you're just wrong. Yeah. It's going to happen. So the better question is how do I manage the emotion? How do I manage that feeling?
And that comes with experience. I think like that's as you go through this entrepreneurial
and awareness.
junior,
you said in the beginning, like awareness, right? So you first have to be aware, then you can like experience, then you come up with a plan. So if you literally just run around and be like, I wasn't even aware.
Just reacting your whole
then
life.
I don't even know how to talk to you, because if you're not aware of what everyone else sees or I'm aware of, then you got to become aware before we can even have a conversation on how to manage and fix.
I think that's a good transition over to teams too, because, to lead a team, you lead a large team. You have to be aware of, the people on the team, and you have to be aware that not everybody's exactly like you, right? Your team is big. It's diverse. You have different types of people on your team. And, I know we're big into the DISC test, and I think that's something interesting. I don't think a lot of people know about what the DISC test is. So maybe you can talk about that and how you implement that in your team.
Yeah. So from a management team standpoint, I mean, you're right on all that, right? You've got different roles, different people, different skill sets. I think about, we've got maybe 35 superintendents out in the field right now, and every single one of those 35 individuals are better at managing a project in the field than I am. Right. And so like, I like saying that out loud because I want them to know that, and they are good at that. So I think, you're the book Traction is where we get the EOS model from. Yep. It talks a lot about putting the right people in the right seats.
Yep.
So when you put the right person in the right seat, you go back to the football analogy, right? If you're a wide receiver, you're a wide receiver. If you're a quarterback, you're a quarterback. So the right people in the right seats. Then what we're needed to kind of think through is like culture, vision, strategy, alignment, buy-in. And so those are all words, buzzwords that you need to talk, but you need to live and breathe it. I remember when I was with an executive coach, we kind of talked through, mission statement, culture statement. I wrote everything out on paper. It was like beautiful. I believed in it. I was like, dude, I'm done. And he's like, cool, you wrote it. Now literally like 90% of the work is living, breathing, perpetuating it, accolades for it. I'm like, oh God, that sounds hard. Yeah. But that's the truth, right? Yeah. And culture is defined by that. So I think in general, from a team standpoint, yes, you have to have all those things. Tools like DISC, is a communication tool. So people can look up, DISC profile, DISC communication. Again, there's not like a good or bad DISC profile.
Sure.
I would argue potentially whatever your role is, there might be like similarities, right? Or correlations to, like, if I've got a project manager and they need to be analytical and understand, right? Nuts, bolts, cross T's, dot I, certain things, or maybe an estimator is a better example. I really can't have the guy that all he wants to do is be an extrovert and he's an IS and he's talking to everybody and he doesn't care about the details. That would be the wrong role, right? Yeah. So again, roles do happen. You have to have the right role for the right communication style. But I think in general, when we actually have the DISC profile on everybody's name tag by their cubicle or by their office.
I love that.
And the reason we do that is so that if I walk into David's office, I want to remember real quick who you are, right? Yep. How you like to communicate. And then maybe I can even tailor my communication with you properly. I'll give an example. Jerome, my business partner, he does much better when I tell him I want to talk about something. I give him a little bit of time to prepare. And then he like blows me away with like the details associated with it. Kate Rogers, who's our COO, she does the same thing. Yeah. She can kind of ebb and flow with me a little bit differently. So there's a little difference there. But my point is that really all I care about is having a very good, strategic, move the needle, healthy, valuable conversation with a you or a Jerome.
Anybody,
or a Kate.
Right.
And so I don't want to go there and just only think about my personality and then talk to someone the way that I want to talk to them. And then I'm not really then it becomes one-sided.
Sure.
It's not as valuable. You second guess later. So
And then the effect that has on the other person.
And also time management. Like I'm trying really hard to not work more than 50 hours a week. People that tell me they work 80 hours a week, I honestly, I don't want to be super judgmental to like Elon Musk and that, but like if you enjoy it, I get it. There's certain people that are, but like that's not sustainable for me. That means your marriage is not going to be as good as it was. You're not as good a father. You can't work out, right?
We talk about seasons for these things too.
Agreed.
You know, if you're
if
you're building the business and you're in your first 1 year or something, you might be in that season where you are working 80 hours, but the goal shouldn't be to continue to work these 80 hours for the rest of your life.
I like you fixing that in my statement, because that's me today.
Sure.
50 hours a week is what I want to do. I define that as work-life balance. And so you're right. Maybe 60 hours a week or 70 hours. When you start getting into 80, I'm like, I can't even do the math because I don't know how many are you sleeping? Like that's a lot. But again, I agree with you. Seasons in life. If you're a young guy, you're not married or you don't have family, you don't, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I do think you can make a conscious decision to work more than, and then you're just constantly watching that balance. And remember, balance is defined by you.
Yeah.
Not some dude on a podcast that's saying something. So like,
exactly.
You just have to like think through that.
The should statements, like don't should all over your friends, you know, like, you know, there is nothing you should do. You should do whatever, you know, as I say, you shouldn't use the word should, you know, do whatever you feel makes you happy. You know, it's like, if it's working 80 hours a week and then binge watching Netflix, then so be it. If that's what makes you happy, I'm not going to judge you, you know, but I think that it goes back to the awareness, and so I totally agree with that.
Yeah. So I mean, to circle back on the team, I mean, it's very important to communicate effectively. It's very important to have a shared aligned vision. You need to put work into it. It's kind of like a marriage. Like if you just act like it's going so good forever, it doesn't. One thing, maybe just to kind of close on that, what I would say that you know, Kate in our office, she had an HR consultant come in and she kind of morphed and put together what I think is just awesome. So it's our annual review process.
Yeah.
It's no longer an annual review process. And I've seen, we've done it before and we've not done it. And it's like 10 out of 10 times it's better to do it the way I'm about to describe it. So what we do is there's a very, there's a process that you can go through, and I can share this with some people if they want.
Yeah.
But you do an annual review. You let the team member talk first. You then talk second. Then you come up with what we call shared feedback. And then what we do is quarterly check-ins. And what those quarterly check-ins do is it touches you every 3 months instead of every year. And like, to me, that's a game changer, because the annual reviews are stupid. It's like people sweat them. And it's like, we want to create a conversation like you and I are having that's casual. Like, hey man, how are you really feeling? And the questions that we can ask, they spur good conversation. And you know, so
you can create adjustments too. I mean, 12 months, like so much can happen in 12 months. I mean, in our industry, we sat down and had some really intentional goals on what we were doing for the first 6 months last year. And then, you know, June, July of 2022 hit, and the market shifted from, you know, a seller's market to a buyer's market overnight almost. So, you know, if you're meeting once a year, you're not able to adapt quickly enough in these market cycles to change your plan. And it's those who can adapt quickly without, you know, any prejudice. Like, we weren't upset that the market shifted. It shifted. Whether we don't have an opinion on it, it's just now we're just going to shift with it.
Yeah. We calendar that. So what we do is, you know, I've got those profiles I told you about that we build. I've got project profile strategies for each of them. And I agree with you. You know, my dad, as you know, he did it he helped you as well. You've got objectives, you've got strategies, you've got action plans. Yeah. Action plans should change on a monthly or quarterly basis based off of whatever macro is telling you. Yeah. Strategy can change, in my opinion, bi-yearly. Objectives should probably be the same for the year, right? Yeah. But at times you need to change that as well. So I fully agree. I think I want the message to be like, you got to be intentional. You got to have this stuff on paper. Don't tell me that you just have it in your head, because what's in your head, remember, communication is like 3 things: the words we say, our body language, and our tone. Yeah. So it's really difficult to be perfect on all of those. So I like starting things out on paper. You can be held accountable. You can go back and reference it. Yeah. And then we can work on body language, tone, how we articulate it. How do we get the buy-in? What's the right way to do it? So in general, I think from a teamwork standpoint, we want to be intentional. We want to have the strategy associated with it. You want to care about the team member. You got to be authentic. And we're also not perfect. It's hard enough, like when I'm saying all this, to still manage a good team, even when you try hard. So people that don't even put any energy into it, it's like mind-boggling to me that it just doesn't completely fall apart on day one.
I'd like to point out too that I think Beta Bay does such an incredible, and you guys have, as the leaders, have done such a great job of building all these things you're talking about. What I can identify them in one word is culture, right? And I think we've like said that, cultures create themselves, whether you like it or not. So be the one to shift it, and that's part of you're saying intentional, and so. You guys do a great job of that. I think you guys were even voted like one of the best places to work for a construction company, or you're ranked somewhere on that list at the top. And so how did you, and I've been in your offices, I know you guys have messaging, there's, messaging, you guys have meetings. Like how do you intentionally, consistently, create these values and hold them to the top of everybody's mind?
I'm a big visual guy. So I think the first thing is the VTOs posted all over the office. So if you're going to the bathroom, if you're at your desk, if you're daydreaming, whatever, you're referencing that, right? And we're also a work in progress. Like I don't want everybody to just think we're perfect, because we're not, right?
Sure.
I mean, COVID kicked our ass, right? The inflation that came from that, the supply chain issues that came from that. So I don't want to necessarily say culture was horrible, but I do feel like we all went through this like stress, right? And now we're kind of coming out of it. And so it's easier to have culture in an environment that like you don't have those extra macro stresses.
We had a culture going into that COVID too, and if it was, at a lower point, that stress might have broken you.
100%. I mean, we had to do across the board pay cuts, right? I mean, how do you think that call went? That was like the worst experience of my entire life.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say, 98% of the team members were on board. With the PPP money, we were able to kind of give it back and fix it right away. But again, I don't want to paint the picture of perfection. So it's a continual work to get there. And you need to solicit from your team. And we get a lot of feedback in the quarterly check-ins. Like one of the things was, I wish you guys would message a little more. And we're like, damn, I feel like we are messaging. What does that mean to you? Well, if you do that. So anyway, Kate, actually, it's really cool. She rolled out, we're doing, I think she's doing either every 2 or 3 weeks now, or maybe every month. It's called What the Why. And it's been a really successful initiative that she's done, because we've done it like maybe for, I think 4 or 5 of them now. And it just explains the why behind the SOPs in our business. Because it's
context is key, man.
Context is key. And so it's hard for people to just, yes, I agree. Yes, I believe. Yes, all this. But then you forget the why behind it. Yeah. So that's an opportunity. We pick a subject. We all get in the conference room or the kitchen area that we have that's huge, that we can get 50 people in. We all talk through it. We do super summits. So the superintendents come in. We talk through that. So I think team members realize that life isn't perfect. Business isn't perfect. Things happen. You need to evolve. I think the honesty card, like I really hope if something happened to me and I die next week, I hope the first words in my eulogy are like, that guy was authentic. He wasn't perfect. He didn't always do everything right. When he made a mistake, he said sorry and he tried to change the behavior to not do it again. But I want to be perceived as authentic. And I think that true authenticism, people know. And true fakeness, like when you're fake and we've all had, employees that are more fake or, they say one thing to your face, and I'm a little bit of a gullible guy because I want to believe when people say something to me, they believe it.
Sure.
I've learned a little bit through cynicism and just experience that at times that's not always true.
You're very transparent yourself.
I try, man.
You hope that everybody is the same.
Like right now, like it's not like I didn't say something to you. Like everything that I'm thinking in my head, I told you, and that's just who I am. That's a personality. Yeah. But I also acknowledge other people aren't that way.
Sure.
So again, I think we got to identify, which isn't, and those are the toxic culture killers that sometimes go, at least in my Achilles heel, is I don't necessarily notice it out of the gate.
Yeah.
So in general, I think it's just that's another part of the teamwork thing that kind of keeps the glue together.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that nothing is perfect. Nobody's perfect. Things are changing, but it's like we talk about on our team, we try to be a high performance team. And what our team's a little smaller, but we're up to like 12, 13 right now. But our high performance teams are adaptive. They're able to make adjustments and thrive under stress, and under difficult situations. And that's why I think you're not giving yourself enough credit on the COVID, like the culture had to have been in a certain position to be able to endure that period.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to the culture. And yes, obviously I think it should have gotten difficult. Otherwise, maybe it wouldn't have been so transparent.
And maybe we wouldn't have evolved and come out of it strong. So
exactly.
I go back when you're saying that too.
I love that.
I go back to the soccer days when, if you and I played soccer together, right? And we were on a good team and I trust you, you trust me. I have your back, you have my back. That's like team and business. We should be doing the same thing, right? Doesn't mean you get to be a complete asshole and I'm like, I'm biased now, right? But what would happen is that, remember I just got done saying communication is body language, tone, and the words you say.
Yeah.
So when we're playing and I'm like, David, get over there quick. Mark that guy. Get his ass over there. Go. Yeah. And then I turn around and do that.
I'm like, don't yell at me.
You don't say that in the game. You're not like, don't yell at me. He's mean, right? And so because you trust me, you know, in the moment, maybe I didn't deliver it perfectly, but I wanted us to win the game so you get over here, I get over here. Now we're back.
Healthy conflict.
Healthy conflict. So in the business, I understand business at times you're not going to cross lines. You don't want to maybe verbalize things in the same way we would in a soccer field or something like that. But I would hope that a team member gives me the benefit of the doubt and says, hey man, I know where his heart is. I know what he's trying to do. I trust him. And so maybe if he delivers a message that isn't perfect because his tone or his word choice at that time wasn't great,
it's coming from
you're not going to go home and be like questioning, is this guy real? Like, no, we've got enough goodwill together that we were teammates. I just wanted you to go over and mark that guy. Hey, I just wanted to know what was going on with that project. I might have said it wrong. And if we really need to talk about it, come back, ask, right? And so that's where I think where Beta Bay is in a good spot right now is we're giving ourselves the benefit of doubt. People can say things that are a little out of context or a little bit not perfect because we can't be perfect. So that only comes with trust, faith, loyalty, those types of things. So
I couldn't agree more. And healthy conflict, you know, it's from a sales perspective, to touch on negotiations here a little bit, healthy conflict is so essential being able to navigate because being able to navigate healthy conflict with team members, with investors, with borrowers, when you're in sales with your clients or customers, with your subcontractors, those conversations, if it comes from a position of love, trust, wanting the best for both parties, then you actually strengthen the relationship tenfold after you're complete with that healthy conflict. I had a good example with an investor this week. We disagreed. We, did not agree on a strategy on a repossession of a property. And I had a feeling, and I even could acknowledge that my feeling may be off base, but it's my feeling and I feel this way. And I am a transparent guy. So I have to at least let you know this is how I feel. And by doing that, he acknowledged my feelings, gave his perspective. I heard him. It was agree to disagree, but we both heard each other out. And then we were able to move past that situation. And then our relationship, after looking back, it's like, wow, we really were able to navigate that and still have a high level of respect for each other.
100%.
And I can't tell you how it feels good when you leave those conversations.
And I think, when we talk about healthy pressure or healthy conflict, at times, depending on what we're talking about and how healthy that pressure gets in the conversation, how heavy it is, we all, this is where I go back. And again, I'm on the forefront of it, is like the neuroscience behind what's going on. So when you're having this healthy conflict, at times, your frontal cortex is closing. When your frontal cortex closes, you actually have an inability to think. You and I do as well. Like this isn't like if you're a high performer, it doesn't apply. Everybody does. I go back to
uncomfortable. That's the feeling of like being uncomfortable.
I go back to a doctor friend of mine, and he said, "Man, when someone was in pain and I had to give them the shot, he go to numb the pain. He goes, I would freak out. I felt so bad that this person was in pain, different than maybe the conflict, but it was a feeling and an emotion that was triggered. His frontal cortex is closing. He actually can't think, and he's about to perform surgery on somebody that's very important." So what would he do? Okay, number one, you're aware of it. Number two, now you're going to you're employing a management technique. One of the things when it comes to mindset and it comes to meditation, it comes to those things, is he does a 30-second breathing exercise. It opens up his frontal cortex. He's then able to go perform his duties that he cares about and wants to do. So again, when you're in the healthy conflict or the health, breathing, thinking through it, standing up, taking a quick walk. Like there's so many coping mechanisms. You could just Google and get it and be aware of it, realize you're in that state, and then try really hard to manage it so that you can then go to that next step of how do we come back together? What can we agree to disagree? What's a healthy medium? Whatever.
I've tried to almost create them like triggers for myself. When I start to feel uncomfortable, I realize that's a trigger. And that means that this is an opportunity for healthy conflict in this instance where now I can get better. And so like, I got to use this example because I use it with our team all the time. It's the buffalo and the cow in the storm. It's like they say when a huge storm's coming through the plains, the cow will walk away from the storm and the storm follows them and they end up staying in the storm much longer. When the buffalo sees the storm, they run right at it and they run right at it and they end up being in the storm for a much shorter period of time by doing so. And so like we use that example a lot around here, but I love it because it's so perfect because when you see the opportunity for conflict, normally, in my experience, it has been best to attack it head on as quickly as possible. And I know that's not everybody's first instinct, but the more you do it, the more comfortable you get confidence, the whole thing. And
well, dude, I love the buffalo cow example. My example on that would be Mark Twain and eat a frog. And so what he says is that if you eat a frog in the morning, nothing else really bad is going to happen the rest of the day.
Can't get worse. Right?
Yeah. So again, the analogy in terms of how do we apply that to business is I got a project manager one time, a little keychain of a frog. And what I said was I go, write down all the things that you have to do tomorrow. And then the 3 that are really bothering you that you probably would procrastinate and not do, that then makes you think about it. You have anxiety, all these different things happen. The buffalo or the frog. I put the frog on that and attack it before 9 a.m. the next morning.
Exactly.
Once you do that, what I've learned, and I agree with you, is 9 out of 10 times it's not as bad as you thought. Right.
That too.
And then you just get it over with. And I made a little conscious deal with myself that just said like anything I don't want to do, I do. Like I just do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so David Goggins will say this a lot, like, oh, it's raining, so I'm not going to go running. No, put your shoes on, go run in the rain. Like when you just go do it, that's part of manipulating your brain.
And your identity, if you don't mind me interrupting, because like on the identity portion, that's who I am. I'm the guy who runs in the rain. I'm the guy who doesn't take the day off. You can create whatever this persona is that you want for yourself. And then really, back to visualization, visualize you are that guy. I'm the CEO of a private hard money lending company. I'm the guy, like I walk up to the elevator. I'm like, I could take the elevator. No, I'm the guy who takes the stairs.
Right.
I'm going to walk the stairs because this is who I'm the guy who wakes up and runs at 6 a.m. and you're driving to work tired. You look out and you're like, who is that guy? That's me.
It's all the little wins. I actually, my wife made fun of me the other day because she looked at my phone and I've got like 500 different times for my alarm. And she's like, really? Like, why don't you just have 10? Like you wake up at either 5:30, 6. And I go, and again, the little win for me in that is I'll sit there and I'll say, all right, I need to wake up at 5:30. I set my alarm for 5:27. Why do I do that? I don't know. I do it because I guess I'm weird.
You're the guy that wakes up ahead of the schedule.
3 minutes earlier than everyone else that wakes up at 5:30. So to me, that's just like a little differentiator. It's a little win.
But that's your persona. You believe that about yourself.
And it feels good. I like it. And then I want to find the next little thing or what, right? So I'm in agreement with you. And I think those are like the little techniques when people are listening to this are like, what can you do to differentiate? And my next big thing is asking good questions. So I'm actually going to create a little diary and journal where I'm trying really hard to be like, what are the good questions? Because what I've learned is sometimes it's hard to just know what to do all the time in the moment.
Yeah.
So Tim Ferriss is a good example. I think that guy is probably in the top 3 guys I know that asks unbelievable questions.
Phenomenal.
So I'm going to go Google actually, I think he's actually got a log. He keeps a diary as well. It's where I got the idea from of what questions should we be asking ourselves? And when we do that, when we stop for a second, we ask ourselves a question, it actually then implores you to vision and learn and
the reflection portion of it is how you actually learn by reflecting on
100%. It. So we could, again, any listener that's saying this is like, oh, that was a cool, maybe I got a couple things. Okay. What am I going to do to be disciplined? I don't know. Google it, ask a friend, ask David, ask me, right? Well, what am I going to do to make my mindset better? What am I going to do to have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset? What am I going to do to differentiate myself from the competition? If I'm 25 years old and I'm that kid Cade that you were just talking about, what am I going to do to make myself different and get to where I want to go quicker than compared to the next guy?
Yep.
I met with him, as you know, and I remember telling him, I said, look, don't ask for any money. If you don't ask for any money, how does a guy like David say no? Only thing you're going to ask for is an opportunity and you're going to go hustle. Tim Ferriss gives an example. He said when he was a nobody, right? Tim Ferriss is 4-hour work week, 4-hour body, that kind of guy, right? He was on Huberman recently. He said, when I was a young guy, he goes, what I used to do is I would go give my time for charity on the weekends. And he goes, what you realize when you do that is that most guys, they go give them their time on charity on the weekends, Habitat for Humanity or Soup Kitchen, stuff like that. You do the minimum to make yourself feel good. And then you go home and do whatever you did. And then you run and tell everybody that you did it, right? So what he did though, was he would try, number one, I'm not going to tell anybody that I did it. And will I still do it? And that helped him from a mindset standpoint of you're doing it for you, not to tell a story. And then he would also just let's say that instead of doing the minimum, whenever there was anything extra that needed to be done, he would jump on it. Yeah. I'll stay 30 minutes later. I'll do this. So what happened? The guy that organized the thing noticed it. And that was his little way of all of a sudden becoming noticeable. Yeah. Right. Another story, he said when he used to go to conferences and he would be on a panel. So I'm talking to the entrepreneurs now, right? When you're a nobody, no offense, if you're 25 years old and you say, I want to get into construction, depending on who you are, like I don't even know how to start that. Like that's hard for me. I get that question a lot, and like I'm good with answering it. But I thought it was interesting because what this guy said is he goes, Tim Ferriss said this, when you're at a conference and you see 4 people on a panel, what happens the second that the moderator says everything's done? Everybody bum rushes the 4 panelists.
Yeah.
What he would do is he would go talk to the moderator because no one would talk to them. And then and then he would say, he'd try to build rapport and he'd say, is there anybody else in this conference that you think I should talk to that would get along with me now that you got to know me for the night? Because who put together that panel?
Right.
The moderator.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's such a strategic way to actually help continue to build, because there are barriers to entry, right? There are. So again, if you're in construction and you're going to go to an ISC conference, ICSC conference, or a broker conference or whatever, what are you doing to actually get to where you want to be and not take 10 years to do it? How do you do it in 3? Those are little tricks of the trade. And I think it starts by asking yourself the question, because if you ask yourself that question, you might or might not have stumbled upon Tim Ferriss. You might or not have, you watch this podcast. You just say, you learn these little things. Next conference go to, you talk to the moderator, next thing something happens and you're like, oh, wow, I got there.
Yeah.
So those are just little tricks that I think are just interesting.
I love that, because I'll just emphasize that it's like you're one connection away from changing your entire life at all times. And that could be, our group, we go to a lot of networking events, and I know a lot of people listening to this podcast, there'll be ones that attend a lot of networking events. And when you're at these events, you might shake how many hands, 100 hands, and you go to how many events in a month, and you're collecting all these business cards. And what are you doing with these business cards? And how are you really, you're meeting 100 title companies. Well, how are you really identifying which title company is a great fit for you and exchanging value? And how can you actually help them and actually provide them value? And if you say you can provide 100 title companies all value at the same time, I'll probably show you a couple ways where you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
And so you have to make strategic decisions at these networking events. And so for our audience here, it's like, you need to build your subcontractor team. You need to build your title company. You need your lender. You need your roofer, your AC company, your insurance agent. There is a team even to flipping homes. Like we flip homes. It's like there's a team associated that could be 20, 30 people for one single family home flip. And then back to like making it more efficient, better strategy, higher and best use, and making it better and better and better, and you just improving the process.
Yeah. You touched on negotiation. I think, one of the things, to parlay off that to go to negotiation is like, you've got to be authentic. You've got to kind of know what you need. You kind of know what that outcome is. I think when you're talking about negotiating in general, you do want to try to create a scenario that there's value to the other side. Chris Voss has a good book that I would kind of
That's a great
read.
book. Yeah.
Masterclass has a few things on negotiation, but those are all platforms that you can use: the books, the podcast, the masterclass, things like that, to kind of keep propelling yourself from a negotiation, how to get better at it, how to be comfortable, things like that.
Yeah. And from a negotiation standpoint, I mean, you're negotiating with subcontractors a lot. And I think that's a really relatable topic for our audience here to kind of finish us off today. What would your guidance be for somebody negotiating with subcontractors? And maybe they're not negotiating to build 7-Eleven. Maybe it's more of a fix and flip on a single family house, but building that team, you did that from flipping homes to building new construction homes to building, 10, 20 homes at one time to building commercial. So how do you build these teams and grow relationships?
I think, I don't want to necessarily have any subcontractor think that, I don't necessarily care about their trade, but I do have to answer that question like this. There's every single project, there's the critical components.
Yep.
And a lot of it, if you understand scheduling, project management scheduling, there's the CPM method, the critical path method. And so what happens is that, you have to get a roof on before you can start doing the interior, for example, right? Yep. So there are critical subcontractors, and then there are some non-critical, right? So the way I would answer that, and what we're hyper focused on, and we're doing some things overseas and getting some quantity, we're doing some things to try to help perpetuate that internally at Beta Bay right now, is really, really, really focusing and managing on what are those critical trades. And depending on the project, right, you know what those are.
Yeah, and I'd say for our audience, so for the house, it's probably roof, AC, electrical, plumbing, You
can also, there's a high correlation between the critical trades and what that represents to a dollar, right? So like I would argue, most times critical, if you look at your critical subcontractors, there's usually 4 to 6 of them, and they usually represent between 50 and 75% of the project cost.
Great point.
So for me, it's always like, it's really difficult to create unbelievable best relationships with everybody, right? So you've got to kind of keep narrowing it down to, okay, well, what are my relationship with the critical ones? Be respectful and make sure.
Yeah.
But painter, right? I just need a good painter.
Right.
And then, but I'm not worried about his dollar amount because he doesn't break budgets.
What
for
are a
me.
couple of things you're looking for on when, you know, you're interviewing 8 painters? Which one are you picking? How are you kind of, I know price is the easy one, but what else are you looking for?
Yeah. So, you know, price for me is just a thing. It's like a component of, I'm looking at their capacity. I'm looking at how many jobs do they have? Do they have the crew members? Do they, you know, in paint, if you use paint as an example,
sure.
I believe most people can paint a wall. I care more about how your trim work looks.
Yeah.
So I also would like to hear conversations because I'm a big believer. If you're a painter, it's all in the prep. So I want to know, how do you prep? So I would kind of create like maybe even a script on, here are the 8 questions I would ask a painter. Depending on how they answer them, I then have a good gut feeling on, I won't even say gut feeling, I have an analytical feeling on how they're going to perform. And then I'm making an educated decision. The way I do it is I have those 8 questions. I have different subcontractors right here. I analyze it kind of like on a pro-con analysis. I then price as part of it, but then I'll circle, okay, this is the guy that if I can get it for the right price, this is who I want to work with. So I come at it from an analytical approach. If you look at like Jordan Belfort, when it comes to negotiation and just kind of talk, he's all about scripts. And so what happens is that, again, if we're manipulating the mind, I got to try to remove my brain, and I want to become robotic in the discipline of asking strategic questions via a script. So if you said, what are the questions I should ask? Good question. We can talk about that. But
ChatGPT is a great resource for that. Those questions too, by the way.
But your subcontractor, you should be asking those questions. You get answers on those questions. You need to verify that those answers are true, right? And then you end up having an opinion. And then I would argue your standard deviations, your statistical probability of success after you go through that exercise is going to be good. If a guy's like, you know, if a guy can't answer the phone, or if he sends you with an AOL email address, or he's got a PO box, or I'm not being judgmental on that, but those are the ones that, all right, man, you got 2 people, you're probably working from your truck. You've got 7 jobs going on. It can be problematic. You know, at Beta Bay, one of the things that we always talk about is like, how many jobs do we have subcontractors on? And unfortunately, I mean, I hate saying this, but it's true. We basically put a mason out of business 6 years ago because we gave him 6 jobs and he really only deserved 2. And if he self-policed himself and didn't say yes to all of it, so now you just failed at 6 jobs instead of doing really well at 2.
Right.
So like, those are the cons that can happen.
Most of the time, I mean, subcontractors want as much work as they can, and they have a little idea of like, I'll figure it out when I get the jobs. And then that, as the owner or the contractor in this instance, like, that can be dangerous for you, because if they don't figure it out, now you're the one holding the bag.
Well, and you know, they're chasing money. They're at times, you know, they're trying really hard to do the right thing, but they get stretched too thin.
So you're evaluating their ability to complete the project
if you said, what's the number 1 issue in construction right now, or at least top 3 issues in construction right now, is I don't know when jobs are going to start. Municipalities suck. The permits are horrible. The architects and engineers aren't. So like,
timing's very difficult.
Yeah, like I think a job's going to start August 1st and it doesn't start until October 1st. So my point is,
signed up 4 more jobs and they're busy.
Exactly. So what happens to the subcontractor? They thought they were going to start August, so then they get other work to fill out October. Now all of a sudden I hit in October, those ones hit as well. Now they've got a problem.
Right.
So the only way, I don't have a great solution for that. The one thing that we are doing is we're trying to
perhaps
over communicate, have options and plan B. So that is the solution, I guess. I'm just kind of, I'm alluding more to the problem in the industry and then what the consequences are and then how that negatively impacts the sub.
Sure.
And I think as a general contractor or as a, you know, someone flipping a house or something like that, you know, you're only as good as your worst sub. And when you write that schedule and you look at your critical path and all those things, like if you want to hit a 45-day schedule, you know, you need to be doing certain things and you can track it along the way. And the second that a critical component goes wrong by 4 days, it literally pushes that lag out.
It's like a manufacturing line, basically.
Assembly,
I know we had that. I'll give you a good example of that one because we were on that one together. We were building that house in St. Pete. And then, you know, it's like, I think it was like the grade in the whole front was wrong. And we already put all the sod down, had the pavers and sidewalks,
I remember that.
everything. And I was like, Joe, we're in a little bit of trouble here, you know, and we had to rip everything back. And it's like, you can't hurry up. There's no, you're back in the time that you have to pull the sod up, pull up all the pavers, you know, re-inspect. There's a process you have to go through that you just can't hurry it up till tomorrow. You got 5 subcontractors that got jobs. You got to schedule them on, come back. So it's just like, well, at that exact moment, I knew that we were 3 weeks away from being complete when we want it to be 3 days.
Yep.
And it is what it is. And what you can do is acknowledge the problem, lean into it, and get it done. And
again, guys like you and me, and I've told you before, you're very coachable, and I love that about you, especially when you were younger and you aren't who you are today. But I think Stephen Covey, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of them is being proactive, and I know that's like a buzzword, but I mean, when you're proactive and you can try to fend off what are the problems that are going to happen. That then allows you to hopefully, instead of dealing with 10 issues on a project, maybe you only deal with 3.
Yeah.
And then my goal is always like, okay, well, hopefully those 3 are all less than $10,000 can be solved in 3 days, right? Like kind of making that up. And
well, you were great as far as like putting everything into perspective at that time. Because I was like I was running 8 new construction projects at the same time.
Yeah.
And had never built a home before. I had your guidance and everything, but I was, running out a lot, and my capacity was getting reached as well. And I remember every time I felt like these problems were catastrophic at times, and then you'd frame it back up, put it in perspective. This is the plan, and then just this is what we're going to do, and we're going to move on from here. And being unemotional about it, and you've really kind of helped me.
And I think we can use that as an analogy to anybody that wants to start a business, right? So like, how do you get a good mentor? I was your mentor in that case. Maybe you and I could have done a little bit more analytical mentorship and say, hey, here's what we're kind of thinking to fend off some of the issues that happen.
Personally, I love it though, because I had to learn by trial by fire in some ways.
Yeah. And again, I mean, so the mentorship and knowing, again, it's a when you have lessons learned when we fail, we can all grow from that.
Yeah.
But I'm also believing that like you can learn from my failure instead of you having to fail.
Right.
So if there's opportunities that we can share, I can be vulnerable. I can tell,
books you can read.
And that's why I think one thing you and I have done that I would employ, the audience to do as well is like have conversations with people you trust about crap that went wrong.
Yeah.
You and I do that a lot, which has actually helped us grow and be better and
it's
learn.
Most of the things we talk about, we don't really talk about a lot of our successes.
Because who cares? I mean, I remember back in the day,
and it becomes like who's more successful type of. Who
and
cares?
all everybody wants to tell you about is like the best deal they ever did. I made $1 million or $100,000 or I did that, and then it's like,
talk about
cool.
Our problems.
If I'm going to grow from hearing your problem, and then maybe I don't have to experience it. I can learn from you, and then now I became better. So again, I mean, go back to the self-improvement. We're all trying to be better tomorrow than we are today.
And last thing to tie it home, and we can wrap it up here, but is the team. Because I'll say I've been with team members when things hit the fan and shit hits the fan and it doesn't go well. Are you with the guy who's like, it's your fault? Or are you like, you were always that partner to me where it was like, doesn't matter whose fault it is, come here, this is how we're going to fix it and move on.
Yeah.
And so like having the right team, because when you have the finger pointers and that it's a lot more uncomfortable, and it's like, so finding out, having the right team, then you're able to adapt on the fly, and it becomes, you can work through issues easier.
Yeah. It's just not healthy, right? And we all want to be held accountable, but I also want to work with people that are willing to accept constructive criticism in a respectful manner, because I'm not perfect. So when someone tells me I'm not perfect and I'm doing something, I'm listening. I'm
Plus,
jotting
when the
down
mistake
notes.
is made, it's like, where do you go from here? Like make sure you learn from it, but I can't go back in time. So what are we going to do about it?
100%. I got to look forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would fully agree.
So appreciate for that.
Yeah,
but
no problem.
Thanks for being here, man. This was awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
Hope the audience got a lot of value from today. I mean, we'll probably have you on again at some point down the road, but
perfect.
It was
Looking
awesome
forward to it. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Thanks for joining us today. If you want to learn more about how to make money with hard money, like, subscribe, and follow us at dkclending.com.